sensory issues are so pervasive in the lives of autistic people. I know it has been in my life, and that's what I want to talk about today, and I hope you'll be able to relate to it. It's such an important issue because sensory issues determine how we feel and how we perform, and how much energy we have. And it affects our ability in so many areas if we get overloaded. And it affects the quality of our life. So let's talk about it. This is Hunter, and I'm going to talk about how sensory issues have affected my life. And let's go in alphabetical order. We've got 5 senses. Most people have all 5, but some people don't. So I hope if you don't have all 5 senses that you'll be able to relate to the ones that you do have that I talk about. So first of all, I want to talk about hearing. Now, hearing is something that's a big deal with me. It is quite possibly the one sense that affects my life the most in both negative and positive ways. Now, you can see I'm down here surrounded by musical instruments. I have an entire basement here devoted to nothing but sound. So I love sound, but there are times when I really don't like it. You see, I can't filter out sounds that I don't want to hear. If there are competing sounds, like multiple sounds happening all at once, and there's one sound that I want to hear, and that's the one that I want to be able to make out, and I want it to be clear to me, I can't ignore the other sounds or filter them out. And it doesn't matter how loud or quiet the other sounds are. They all come at me with the same intensity. And that really creates issues, because I could be sitting there listening to my stereo or trying to watch a movie on TV, and there's another sound happening outside my house. It could be a quarter mile away, somebody with a loud muffler, or somebody with a leaf blower, or a dog barking. Now, again, it could be a half mile away, quarter mile away. And so to most people, they wouldn't even hear it. But I can hear it, and it drives me nuts, and I can't separate it from what I'm hearing in the movie or on the stereo. So it makes for a very stressful experience. And trying to make out conversations, what somebody is saying when there's other sounds going on around you, that's tough for me too. And here in my neighborhood, it's a sensory onslaught in the summertime. Every day there's a chainsaw, lawnmower, weed eater, and my personal favorite, a leaf blower, a barking dog, and this is every day for hours at a time in the summertime. And it really stresses me out. And I'm in my own home, and I find it hard to relax with these things going on. I don't care how far away they are, I can hear them, and I can't tune them out. I have one neighbor across the street. I'm tempted to go knock on his door and ask him when he's going to propose to his leaf blower, because he's apparently infatuated with it. Now, we live in a very noisy world. There's noises coming from everywhere, and they're usually pretty loud too. At least to me they are. So I walk around pretty exhausted a lot of the time. It kind of puts me almost on the verge of a meltdown, I guess a meltdown. But I've spent my whole life trying to hide it. So I might appear okay on the outside, but on the inside, I'm a little overloaded, and stressed. And it's very exhausting. And when you're exhausted, it's hard to do things. It's hard to focus, hard to concentrate, hard to get work done. So it's a big hindrance to my life and I think a lot of other autistic people's lives. I could talk about sound so much that I actually made a separate video about nothing else but sound. And next we have sight. That's another sense that gives me a lot of issues because I can't filter out competing visual things either, just like I can't filter out sound. I'll give you an example how this affects me. Driving is exhausting for me. I've done it since I was 15 years old and I can do it. The actual operation of the vehicle is no problem. It's just processing all the visual stuff, and there's a bunch of visual stuff happening when you drive. You've got, first of all, your dashboard, which is lit up, and maybe your radio and all that inside the car. And then you've got the road itself, which you got to look at. Then you got road signs, you got traffic lights, you got other cars, you got pedestrians, you got bicyclists, you got buildings, billboards, the actual natural environment, the trees, the sky, the sun. And again, it's all coming at me at the same intensity. So it's pretty exhausting. And then if you're driving at night, you've got all those things plus headlights. And plus, your lit up dash and all that inside the car. And headlights nowadays are much brighter than they used to be, which is an objective fact that I've read. And it's apparent. And you've also got not only headlights, you got lights from traffic lights, buildings, homes, street lights. And then if you got a siren going off, like there's a police car or an ambulance, forget about it. And I know the sirens now are much brighter than they used to be. And I'm sure they did that for what they thought were safety reasons, but it actually makes things more unsafe because it disorients me if there's one going off. Speaking of sirens, this is related back to sound. I didn't mention this, but like if I hear a siren when I'm driving or I hear a loud motorcycle, I don't know where the sound's coming from, what direction it's coming from. And that's very disorienting. Going into a store is exhausting, especially Walmart or a grocery store, because there are so many items in the store and they're not uniform items. There are all kinds of different things and it's everywhere. And of course you got the lighting and all of that too, but you go into Walmart, for instance, you've got beach balls over here, you got a 20-pound tubs of salsa here, you got furniture here, you got cameras here, you got a life-size stuffed animal of Barney the dinosaur. So, I'm overwhelmed just walking in the door visually, even if there weren't any people in the whole store. There's just so much visual stuff to take in. And then if you got people in the store too, you got to look at them as well so you don't smash into them when you're walking around. And in a grocery store, you got all kinds of different food items all over the place, or here in the United States, all kinds of junk items all over the place. But on a related note, clutter is very difficult for me because first of all, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's not nice to look at. It's ugly, Plus, there's just so much going on with clutter. It's distracting, and I can't filter it out. If I'm in a room with a bunch of clutter, I can't focus. And so there's a lot of visual stuff and a lot of auditory stuff. This world is very loud and very hyperactive, so there's always stuff going on all around you. And again, inside, I'm exhausted, even though on the outside I try to hide it. And it really makes life pretty hard, to go to places. When you combine sound and vision overload, we're talking just simple things like going to the store, or driving to the store, or going to a concert, or being at a Christmas party, or being around family. These are not just silly little quirks, they're serious issues for us. Now, the next sense I want to talk about is smell. And that issue, or that sense, has not really caused me a whole lot of issues in my life, and certainly nothing that's debilitating. It's very common for autistic people to struggle with perfumes and things like that. And oddly enough, I don't have an issue with perfume. It doesn't bother me, the smell of it. Now, there are some smells I don't like, of course, all the common ones that nobody likes, but then there's cigarette smoke really kind of gets on my nerves, it kind of makes me feel a little sick, and it gets in my head, it makes me look kind of dizzy. There's no way I could sleep in a smoking allowed hotel room overnight. And it's hard to imagine, but when I was growing up, smoking was allowed everywhere. Restaurants, airplanes, people smoked inside their homes all the time. In malls, shopping centers. So I'm glad that that's no longer true. I don't like the smell of burnt food, especially burnt popcorn. That's probably the worst. And this is unusual and it's very uncommon, but I don't like the smell of coffee. For some reason, I just don't. If somebody's drinking a cup of coffee in the same room with me, that's fine. But if I'm in a place where they're brewing a whole bunch of it and mashing it up, or whatever you want to call it, I don't like that smell very much. But that's no big deal, really. Next, we have taste. Taste hasn't caused any major issues for me either. Now, you're talking about taste. I love to eat. I love food. I can put it away. I eat like a horse, you know. For Valentine's Day, I got food, a card, and a bouquet of flowers, and I wrote it a poem. And I'm thinking of proposing to food, you know. I love it so much. And I tell you, if ice cream were good for you, I'd be eating it every day, 3 times a day. And I remember one time my great aunt made a rhubarb pie. Now, I don't know if any of you have had that before, but at the very least hers was really good, and I'll never forget it. Now, there are some certain food textures, I guess, and I don't know if that's sort of related to touch as well. You know, it's a combination of taste and touch, maybe. But like when I was a kid, I didn't like coconut because of the texture of it. It was a weird texture, and I used to not like crunchy peanut butter. Of course, now I like it. And I've never liked cooked spinach or cooked greens. I love raw greens. I eat it by the handful, but cooked, I don't know, it's all soggy, and I just don't like it. And I don't like macaroni and cheese. Something about the sound of it when you stick your fork in it. It's like a brain, you know. And mayonnaise, especially if it's really slopped on there. There's a bunch of it, you know. The next is touch. Touch has not really caused too many issues, but it's kind of midway, you know. It hasn't caused as many issues as sound and vision, but it's caused more issues for me than taste and smell. It's very common for autistic people to not like to be touched, or at the very least, they don't like to be hugged. And I'm okay with it. Hugs don't bother me at all. In fact, they're nice, you know, if they're done right. If you don't commit to it and you just sort of give it like a halfway hug, you know, or it's kind of offensive, you know. Sometimes you can tell when a person's doing it because they just feel like they're supposed to, because it's a social ritual or whatever. And in those cases, I'd rather the person just not even do it, not even bother, because it's kind of offensive to me. And the same thing with a handshake. I like firm handshakes. That to me, you know, feels like, hey, this person's feels like I'm their brother, you know. And it's a cool feeling, you know. But then a limp handshake is so offensive to me. You know, I don't like it. I wish a person, again, would just not bother. I think they're doing it just to go through the motions when they give a limp handshake. And if I'm on public transportation, or if I'm at a sporting event or concert or something like that, and I've got strangers sitting next to me, I don't want them touching me. And I have a big sense of personal space. And I don't like it if you're in a mob, you know, a big crowd. You know, you've seen these pictures of, you know, rush hour on the sidewalks in New York City. You know, that's a nightmare for me, you know, brushing up against all these people. It would drive me nuts. And I don't like my face to be wet or my hands to be all wet. It just drives me nuts. And I like being in the shower. I like being in the pool. I like being in a hot tub. I just don't like getting out. It's such a major sensory transition, for instance, to go from being in a hot tub to getting out of it. And it's a very unpleasant feeling. And I think I feel it to a much bigger degree than most people. And the first thing I want to do is dry off. And the first thing I want to dry off is my face. And I don't like hot weather at all. Summertime's really tough for me because it's so hot. And also, I didn't talk about this when I was talking about sight, but the sun is so bright in the summer. So I really don't like to go outside too much in the summertime. And summer is also probably the loudest season of the year too, with all the lawn equipment and everybody's all hyper and stuff. So I really am not a big fan of summer. Now, again, let me repeat that these are not just, fun little quirks, these are things that really affect the quality of life and can really sap my energy. And, you need energy to perform in life, to get things done. It's a big life issue for us. Now, I want to mention that I've heard people who are highly sensitive, say that they feel like it's a weakness, like they feel weak. And all I say to that is, it's not a weakness, because the animal kingdom has heightened senses, like a lion or a tiger. And you wouldn't exactly call them weak. Like, if you've ever been to the zoo, which I don't like zoos because they cage up all those animals, and it's just not right. But if you ever you go to a zoo and you see the tiger or a lion or a gorilla, just pacing back and forth, it's because they're overloaded. And you wouldn't call them weak. And so it's not a weakness. And like with driving, for instance, yeah, it's exhausting for me, but I have what most people what appears to be very good reflexes, because when I'm driving, because I'm noticing everything. So if somebody does something that's not very smart, like they pull out when they shouldn't or whatever, I react to it very quickly because I see it, and I'm actually kind of almost expecting it. Now, I could do a whole other video about the positive aspects of having heightened senses. I'm sitting here in this room here, surrounded by musical instruments. I've got my whole basement devoted to nothing but music and sound, because I love good sounds so much, and I appreciate them so much. There are people who appreciate visual things so much. I do. I appreciate a good painting or a good movie. The movies today, to me, are not very visually appealing because the only colors in them are brown and gray and white, and the editing is so fast, the video editing, that you can't really tell what's going on, especially in a battle scene, But if you get an older movie, like one of my favorite movies is Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, and it's from 1974, and they have made a 4K restoration of it, and man, it looks great. And there's another movie, The Curse of Frankenstein, that has Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in it. And they've done a 4K restoration, and it looks great. It was made in 1957, and the color and everything just looks wonderful. And they're talking about doing a 4K version of Hammer Films version of Dracula, which here in the U.S. is called Horror of Dracula, and I'm really looking forward to that. And I probably do end up doing a video on some of my favorite movies at some point, but anyway, back to the subject. Just then, that little tangent I went off on, that shows you how much I can appreciate visual things if they're done right. And I've already talked about how much I appreciate food and a good meal. I mean, I think I savor a good meal much more than the average person. Well, I tell you something else I appreciate, and that's you. I sure enjoy talking with you. I hope you've been able to relate to the things I talked about here today. I have a strange feeling that you did. And that's what I like about you. Not only are you special, but I can relate to you. And so it's always fun getting together with you and just talking with you. And I look forward to talking with you again real soon. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So we've got hearing, sight, taste. I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So the 5 senses are hearing, sight, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So the 5 senses are hearing, sight, taste. I could really go on and on about sound and how it's affected me and how it does affect me, to the degree that I actually made a video about nothing about